I'm going to assume a Taoist approach to my conundrum. So, the idea of effortless action in the world is often available to people who do not try to fight time or don't try to fight a circumstance that seems to be out of their control and somehow frustrating, and all they want to do is kind of rage against it. So, this is kind of my personal conundrum at the time where I'm trying to build content. The memory on my phone or on my laptop is not sufficient, so everything crashes relentlessly. And from a metaphysical perspective, it could be what is what is your aim? Like, what is your intention? So I had to maybe step aside and think, if I was watching myself right now, what would I assume of you? Right. So I kind of took that step back after a nap, and um, and just kind of wondered, like, okay, if I don't continue with this content building, I mean, what's the loss? Nothing really. It's the idea of I feel like I have something to share and I want to share it because for the past 3 years things have been just very disorienting for a lot of people. Like, what is reality? What is it that we can rely on? Is it built in one particular person, like the Dalai Lama, the Pope, like all these gurus, or is there something bigger than that in the universe that we can rely on? So, in kind of reviewing that, I have a postmodern lens that allows me to approach this really, really big question or this really, really big um, meaning making question. And because I built it on an orthodox tradition and I'm kind of stepping outside of it a little bit, I feel like my story can have some validity for people who are curious about wanting to know something bigger about the universe. So with that intention, it was almost like, okay, well, tie that back into the world. Like, assuming somebody does decide that, okay, maybe there's something to your content, then what? And that's kind of where I'm stuck because I don't really know. Like, you can't really do anything with it. Like, you can't assume a job where you're selling religion. You can't take a political office and say, this is the way of life. This is now what we have to do. Because in a democracy, the idea is you understand what the demographic wants, and then you kind of build a platform for it, and then you go ahead and continue to make it available, right? So it's not that you're preaching anything, you're almost kind of facilitating an easier way of life for a country that you live in, and you want to continue to make a country that people want to remain living in and even migrate to. And so you increase the country's economy overall. It's just like it's a healthy cycle of continuing life. So stepping outside of that lens, it became, I don't know, like, some people are just fine without wondering about these big questions. They've had a life that works for them. They maybe have something that's meaningful inside their heart that they don't necessarily need to talk about, and that's the end of it, and that's perfectly fine. So then it became, okay, so what is my problem right now? And that's it. I just decided that I am maybe just going through a moment of time where, because I am going from phase one, like orthodoxy, to secular world, to like postmodern understanding of how to live in the world and how to live my life and how to build it. I just needed to kind of hear myself and almost um, create this platform so that people who in the future are going through this kind of pathway have someone to relate to. So it's not to say that you're going to be left alone just because um, there's no gurus anymore and you're almost kind of like in the middle. Like, I believe in God, but how am I supposed to understand myself in a postmodern world? So that's where God says, I am creating people in the world to help each other. So there are hierarchies in the world. Like, we know that there are prophets who supersede others um, in excellence, for example, because of the struggles they had to kind of go through. So there's a verse in the Quran that says God has created us for each other to help each other. So a plumber, for example, is somebody who some might assume is, it's just a trade job. It's not as prestigious, right? And then others might say, yeah, oh, for sure. Like, if you've got like a surgeon, that's way more prestigious. But from a metaphysical understanding, they both need each other to different degrees, right? So if I have an appendix that burst, I need that surgeon, right? If that surgeon then goes home and ends up having a basement that's flooded or a kitchen that's flooded because a pipe burst, he's going to need that plumber. So that's the idea of it, is that in life, we're not supposed to assume any kind of haughtiness over anybody because of what their station is in life. The only thing that can actually promote a person metaphysically is their understanding of piety and how they treat other people, and how they understand how to kind of draw a limit between themselves and then the opportunity to transgress, to almost like take down the right of somebody else. So if I know that I'm in a position of power and wealth and I can trample on somebody, but I choose not to, that in itself is a type of holding back and a type of self-restraint that elevates me metaphysically, unbeknownst to myself. So that's kind of like being charitable with yourself, because you're preventing somebody's well-being from diminishing. So it's like the negative golden rule. So if you have something that you don't want done to yourself, don't do it to others, right? Instead of do unto others what you want done to yourself. So it's pretty cool if you kind of look at it metaphysically. The two do kind of overlap. If you want to kind of have something that you think about in the back of your mind anytime you're kind of in an indecisive position in your life. And so I think I'm just going to go with that. It's so funny. It's like the most ironic thing is that when I'm struggling with something, it's literally that because I'm so stressed and so focused on getting it accomplished, I just almost, my frustration and my angst, it just builds and builds and builds until I just crash. And then after the fact, I realize when when I'm kind of like easing into ease and I'm like a fresh start and I've slept and I'm like, it wasn't that bad that I lost the data or whatever it was. I look back and I'm like, I'm almost grateful because it helps me relax and it wasn't really that bad. It could have been way worse. So that's kind of like a cycle that I've noticed in life. Someone had equated it with the heart, how the heart expands and constricts. So that's just the nature of life. It's going to be constriction where there's like these frustrating moments and you have to kind of get through them. And the more patient you are through them, the more rewarding it is going to be when you go through the expansion, where you're like, oh, you're at ease, and then you metaphysically start to have more openness to inspiration and to new ideas, and then you kind of just evolve with life, right? So it has so many beneficial dimensions in like every way to you personally, and then eventually it'll evolve from around you. So I'm gonna stop there, and hopefully things will continue, and I'll be able to kind of deal with the moments of distress without crashing so hard.